People are using ChatGPT. And I really think companies need to put in place, absent accidentally hiring someone who might be a bot, and making sure you kind of have your protocols in place from a security standpoint with the interview process and the onboarding process with your employees that you have that are already onboarded, that are real employees, human employees, making sure that you have policies in place as it comes to how they can and can't use AI, what types of AI are approved in the workforce.
That's Leah Stiegler, principal and management side labor and employment attorney, working with business leaders and HR professionals nationwide from her office at the Virginia-based law firm Woods Rogers. She advises employers through the entire employment life cycle, from recruitment to termination and severance, to ensure compliance and keep them out of court. You can catch Leah on her YouTube series, What's the Tea in L&E, where she tackles the topics that keep HR professionals up at night. I'm Germain, the host and producer of the Human Resources podcast. In this episode, Leah is going to discuss fake employees created by artificial intelligence. Welcome, Leah.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, that's quite an intriguing topic, right? Fake employees created by AI. Now, do we know cases where this has happened?
It is hard to believe that. You would think, how would we as professionals, or anyone hiring somebody not realize that their employee is fake, right? I mean, you used to hear about people catfishing in the dating world, and now it's like we have catfishing in the employment world. But yes, there are cases of this. I haven't seen too many personal clients that have reached out about this, but it's all over the news. This idea that applicants are creating fake, whether it's LinkedIn accounts, resumes, and then even actually sort of those deep fake or bot looking people, human beings that will go on a video interview. They're wild. They look so real. It is very difficult to tell the difference.
But why would anyone want to do that? I don't quite understand.
I was wondering this too, and kind of looking into it and talking to some cybersecurity folks at our firm. One of the biggest risks is, these are generally people who are bots, right? Let's say people, but they're hackers or scammers who are applying for remote positions. So the hope would be that a human or a manager never really finds out. By the time they hire them, within a few days or weeks, all they need is a few days or so to get in with a company and try to install some sort of malware or gain access to proprietary or confidential information, maybe payroll information. And so it may be mainly from a hacker standpoint. You also see real life applicants that are creating fake LinkedIn accounts and fake companies and backgrounds. So somebody who maybe wants to apply for a director level position, but has maybe, has only ever worked as a non-management level employee, is creating a LinkedIn profile where they're working in a fake company, and then they can create fake websites or other fake LinkedIn accounts with AI generated overviews about this company and their positions, to just kind of level up, to get a better opportunity to get the interview and get the foot in the door.
So what does the rise of AR-generated fake employees reveal about potential vulnerabilities in current hiring and onboarding systems?
I think it's making companies realize that this isn't one of those things that in today's world, you just can watch a news segment and then say, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened to that company, because it's very likely that this is happening to your company. And it's funny because I want to say about a year or two ago, I was talking, a number of our HR clients were complaining about how they would receive something like 50 applicants or applications for one position. And by the time they reached out to, let's say, 20 of them to set up interviews, maybe only 5 of those people would respond. And then only 2 of them would actually show up for the in-person interview. So there was this huge pool of applicants, but then only few people actually showing up. And so now I'm wondering, looking back on that, okay, were some of those fake applications that were hitting those companies, right? And I think companies are having to realize, okay, this potentially could be impacting us. And so, what does this mean for us? Well, I think number one, it's we need to be aware of it. HR managers, owners of companies, and hiring managers, anyone on an interview panel needs to be aware of it, and they need to know what it looks like, and they need to know how to bypass it. Dr. Germain, are you aware of how you might be able to bypass or figure out if you're interviewing a fake person?
No, but I'd love to hear about what those tips are.
Well, see, I could be fake, right? How do we know?
You're right,
um,
you could.
Yeah. So I was reading a couple of different things and then talking to some of my colleagues who are in a lot of that, the sort of the cyber hacking world. And it's a lot of anything from forcing the applicant, if you're doing a video interview, to wave their hand or move their body around because, maybe an unsophisticated AI generated deepfake is not going to be able to keep up with that fast movement. So, something like that, having humans review resumes as well. I think we do have to realize that employees and applicants might be using AI, but I know it's probably just as equally used by employers as well. And I see a lot of clients using AI screening techniques to screen and weed out candidates. And one problem with that is that one AI generated system may not catch another AI generated system's fake resume. And so when they set up the person for an interview with a real human, they're setting that the employer human up with a fake bot. So I think it's important for companies, in addition to knowing about it and training managers and hiring managers about it, to be able to have in-person aspects of the interview process. So having a human review the last pool of resumes and cover letters, maybe having a phone call with someone before you set up a remote interview. And then a lot of companies are also requiring certain kinds of in-person interviews, which I don't know, maybe long gone in your world. Are you seeing in-person interviews anymore?
At the university level, we only invite maybe the top two, perhaps three candidates in person.
So what's interesting is I was recently hiring for an associate in our office, and we interviewed a few different applicants, and only one of them I offered for the interview to be in person or remote. And if they came in person, they could get a tour of the office and meet other attorneys as well. And only one of them selected to come in person. And I was shocked. And some of them, their addresses indicated that they were in the same city in Richmond, Virginia that I'm in. And so I was like, wow, applicants are not as, interested in coming in person. They want to be in that remote space. So yeah, so I think you definitely need some human element to your interview process because you don't want to be scammed by a deep fake bot. The other part about this is you're going to see this more when it comes to remote positions because it's obviously easier for someone to scam you if they can just interact by way of email or, Teams messages when they first started a company or in remote video settings. But, certain types of positions as well. So if you're hiring for, let's say, an IT position, a remote IT position, you definitely want to have some in-person process because an IT individual is likely going to have access to a lot of very sensitive areas in the company's systems where someone can install malware. Anyone who's involved in finances with your company should definitely have an in-person interview. You do not want to be negligent, and especially if you're dealing with like client or customer dollars. So let's say you're hiring someone to work in an accounting or a collections department of a law firm or a bank, right? You want to make sure there's some in-person element to that because again, that applicant, once they're hired, they may very well soon thereafter have access to your customers' information or your own proprietary or financial information.
If an AI generated employee somehow completes real work successfully, does it challenge our traditional definition of employment and value creation?
That is a really good question. And because you almost wonder, right? I mean, at that point, you did just essentially retain a robot, and so to speak, right? Or, some sort of AI generated tool. And a lot of companies, they'll, for certain positions or routine tasks or whatever it may be, are getting rid of employees and replacing them. But to actually unknowingly hire an AI generated employee. Yeah, that's an interesting one, right? Because are you as the company, you're depositing their paycheck somewhere into some account, right? So there's got to be some sort of human at some point involved in the process. Generally speaking, I think it would be a significant concern if you hired a fake employee who is performing the entire job. But I think what we're seeing more often is real employees who are using AI to supplement their work or to take over significant parts of their work. Or I had one case where a client hired a remote employee and the client used an AI time tracking software on the person's computer. They had installed this on all their employees' computers. So they could track when the keyboard was being touched, when people were, responding to emails or whatnot. And the employee had installed in some sort of AI system of some sort or software that responded to emails and bought the employee time, or responded to chat messages and bought the employee time. And it was most likely because this employee was either not sitting there at their desk or they were working another job and they were going to try to get to the work later. So I do think we have to recognize that employees are probably going to be using AI to supplement their work. And we all know about ChatGPT, right? There are those memes out there. Have you seen the memes where people say, my favorite coworker, and then it pans over to ChatGPT?
Yes, yes, yes.
It's funny because it's realistic. People are using ChatGPT. And I really think companies need to put in place, absent accidentally hiring someone who might be a bot, and making sure you kind of have your protocols in place from a security standpoint with the interview process and the onboarding process, with your employees that you have that are already onboarded, that are real employees, human employees, making sure that you have policies in place as it comes to how they can and can't use AI, what types of AI are approved in the workforce. For instance, you could use ChatGPT, but you can't put in customer or company sensitive information in there or personnel information. You've got to be careful not to engage in copyright. That's another big thing because we don't know where these AI systems always pull from. And there are a lot of lawsuits where, a company may have used an AI generated video and that video for marketing purposes, and that video includes, a celebrity's face. And so we have to be careful of that because the company ultimately is going to be liable for that.
It reminds me, actually, our discussion of an article that was fairly recently published about Carnegie Mellon, who staffed a fake company with AI agents. And I think the gist of it is it was a complete disaster. But
What was the purpose of the company?
it was called the Agent Company, and it was an autonomous agent that can browse the web, write code, organize information in spreadsheets, kind of what AI is good at. There were loads of mistakes, and the company failed. The fake company failed. But there's loads of articles right now about, how fake AI job applications can pose some serious risks for employers. So you're right. I mean, the tips you provided are definitely useful. How can organizations balance the need for digital efficiency? Because we know it works. Some of those chat GPT functions are very useful and it helps with automation. So how do you balance that with the rising threat of identity fraud and workforce manipulation?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think we're learning every single day different ways that companies can be proactive to protect themselves. Because ultimately, if AI messes up for you as a company, you're going to be on the hook. I think a couple of things, just like companies do annual harassment trainings, I think they need to start doing some sort of annual AI related training on the company's policies and procedures around the use of AI and what AI is approved, as well as explaining to employees what the risks are so that they are aware. When it comes to something like an employee potentially putting customer information into an AI generated system and the company is in breach of some contract, companies really need to sit down and they need to evaluate what their risks are because I think AI is here to stay and no one does themselves any good. No company is going to do themselves any good by completely banning AI, but I think there can be an ethical and a lawful use of AI. And I think companies have to recognize that doing so is probably necessary to stay ahead in today's world. And so, making sure companies understand the risks. Like if you're going to be using some sort of AI system in your payroll or your timekeeping system, make sure that it is properly aligned with your state and federal laws, right? I mean, this may be an AI system that's just keeping up with federal overtime, and you may be living in a state like California or New York where there are different overtime requirements. I have seen AI generated work product that a client has sent to us that they found an employee was using. And the AI generated system was using offensive and derogatory terms, right? And so if that's being sent around, you potentially have a harassment concern there. Companies really need to be mindful of what type of systems they're using, what are the legal risks associated with that, whether it's a wage and hour concern or some sort of, harassment complaint. A copyright complaint is a big one, as well as breaches of contract and confidentiality. The other thing I'll say is almost every company has vendors, contractors, third parties that they're working with, and making sure that when you're executing contracts with those third parties, that you actually have some sort of disclaimer in there about your AI policies as a company, and to make sure that the other party you're doing business with is likewise disclosing the AI that they are using.
It's hard to make sense of how fast things are happening and how it's changing the landscape of the HR profession. It's quite mind-blowing. As you said, who knows where this very discussion we're having will look like in a year from now. Perhaps we can schedule another podcast with you and talk about how AI has changed the HR landscape in 2025. And we'll talk about that in 26 and see.
I think what's going to be really interesting in the next year or so is what laws pop up that kind of regulate this, if any. I know the federal government had tried to pass some legislation to create almost federal legislation around AI use. That got shot down, I believe, by the Senate recently. And so states are starting to work on passing legislation. I know California, Colorado have state laws coming out about the use of AI. So it'll be important for employers to stay on top of what they can and can't do in light of different state laws that are coming about. And then I think companies also need to take a minute and just recognize that this is happening, and even for themselves, what is the look of a company using AI like? There was an article in the New York Times last week. The title of the article was something like, I realized that I was interviewing with an AI generated employer or interviewer, and it felt so hollow, I just hung up on it, right? And I think the other part of this is even if companies are using AI to screen applicants and ask the questions, are you going to lose good applicants who aren't going to relate as well to that bot during an interview process, or who are going to feel like, hey, this company is not personal enough for me. I want that personal touch. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what employees do with it versus what employers do with it over the next year as well.
That's a good point. And I think there's this lack of transparency is really troubling. I mean, if I ever have a job interview and I'm expecting to see a person on Zoom and it's obviously a chatbot, I think, isn't there, and that's like a lack of transparency. And I would have liked to know in advance that would be the case. So yes, my relationship with that potential employer will be changed. It will feel like, is this even a real company? I want to work for this place. You're right. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. And if they're so quick to replace human functions with AI, will my future job be replaced with AI soon hereafter? Right? Is this the company that I want to be with?
Yeah, exactly. Well, thanks for your valuable insights, Leah. It was fantastic having you on the show, and I may take you on this 2026 interview to talk about this again.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll try to stay abreast of all the different state laws. So thank you for having me, Dr. Germain.
Support for this show comes from Western Carolina University, a campus of the University of North Carolina system, with the technical assistance of Kelly Minnis.